So this is just, again, segues really nice with what I want to close with today, because the idea that God has been doing a work among the children of Israel for millennia is an understatement. And so how he has again and again and again he's created a way in which he will preserve his people. It's just because he has forever promises. So again, you can say that the northern tribes were taken out by the Assyrians, and they were never, ever in control of the land again, ever. So they were just kind of a hodgepodge of all the different people from all the different nations. They were just never seen as pure from that point on. And that's just what happened to them. It was never together from that point on. The South would be able to make the case that they were returned back to the land after their captivity, like they were told that they were going to be. But nonetheless, even at that point, they were displaced. And when they came back from the Babylonian captivity under the Persians, the next succession, they were also under the thumb of the Greeks and then under the thumb of the Romans, who ultimately displaced them. But there were so many promises that God made that he would reestablish them in the land at some point. Historically, it's always lacked any kind of a really solid fulfillment that fit every description of all of the prophets, and that's what we're kind of looking at as we go through this study about modern Israel. I want to take a look at Genesis chapter 15. Let's turn there as we work through this and make the case for the nation. And so what we've looked at so far, chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, there's a promise that God will do this work, and it will be to the plurality of mankind, to the nations or the families of mankind. So somehow, through a descendant of Abraham, there is going to be a blessing that's going to be to all mankind anywhere on the earth, to the families of mankind. So it's not specific to any location, and it's to the whosoever's, basically. Now, that doesn't happen through any of his line until you get to the person of Jesus, who is able to deal with the sin of mankind and gives himself as a ransom, as a payment for the sin of all mankind. That happens through him. But there's something different entirely that happens. We looked at it last time we were together, in chapter 13. A promise about the land is actually given. And I'm going to give it to you and to your descendants, and he talks about it being everlasting. Now let's get to chapter 15, the second part, where we start to get more details now, and how it's going to be a specific person. So, chapter 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward." But Abram said, "Lord God, what will you give to me, seeing that I am childless, and the heir of my house, all that I have, is this person who serves me, the top of my servants, a man named Eliezer of Damascus. He's not one of my children. He's just a servant, and he's from Damascus. He's Syrian." Now, Abram said, "Look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, the one born in my house is my heir." And then, behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "This one will not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body will be your heir." That's an important part. And if only they had really asked for more detail on this, things might have been different than they are. And we're going to get to that in our next session as we get to chapter 16. But for now, one that's going to come from your body. Then he brought him outside, and he said, "Now here, look towards heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them." And he said to him, "So then should your descendants be." And he, Abram, believed in the Lord, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. So, what is it that makes a person righteous or acceptable before God? It is that when God offers you something, that you take him at his offer. Lord, I believe that what you have offered to me is something that you will make good on as far as that promise I accept. So that's what Abram did here. God takes him outside and said, "Now, if you could number the stars, can you number the stars?" And of course he can't. "So then will your descendants be." And Abram started the whole thing by saying, "The one that's in my house he's the only one I have as an heir. You haven't given me children like you had said that you would." So here God says, I want you to understand, it just hasn't happened yet, but let me reestablish in you that you will have descendants. Remember, that's what he promised him in chapter 13. So he says all this thing, and Abraham says, great, I'm good. I believe you. I trust you from the original promise that you had given. Now, notice what he has done. He also does this part in verse 18. So it is, you're going to have descendants, you will have children. And from that, you're going to have a line of descendants, and here's what's going to happen. On that same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants, those ones that I promised to you that you'll have, that you won't be able to count them, they're like stars in the heaven. So those descendants, I have given this land from the river Egypt, which is the Euphrates, that great river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kadamites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites and the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Now, he says, to your descendants, I have given to you this land from the river of Egypt, the great river from that to the Euphrates. So from the Nile to the Euphrates, starting up here, you're talking about Syria, Jordan, bits of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all of that area. You can go ahead, there's maps that I don't have one handy to put up, but you can look online. What are the land allotment of Genesis 15:18? So here's what happens in this chapter. We'd already read what he said in chapter 13. We looked at it our last time. I'm going to give you a line of succession of children that are going to be born to you. Now, here he adds detail to that. There are going to be some that you will not be able to number them. They're going to be so numerous like the stars in the sky. So then will your descendants be. And by the way, I'm going to tell you the size and the scope of the land. Now, this is the land promised to him. It would have been the land of them coming back after the captivity in Egypt, which is also spoken about here. That's told to him in verse 14. So Abram's told those descendants that you don't even have yet are going to be in servitude to another nation. And that would be 400 years in the making that will all be happening. So by the time that they come back from that, they're going to be able to take a land that should have encompassed the river to the Nile to the Euphrates. That's what was offered to him. They never took anywhere near that much land, but that's what God told him. You can have that. That's what I'm going to give to you now. So anyhow, he gives it to him as this is the promise that I have given to you. It's going to be someone who will come from your own line. This will be your child. You will have him. So the boundaries are there spelled out in verses 18 to 21. That's how big it would be. Mainly it is the people that are mentioned here, for the most part, are those that would occupy the land in Israel, plus most of the land that he's talking about to the east and a bit to the north as well. So this is what God gave to them. This is what is yours. You can drive them out and go as far as you want to. These are your assigned boundaries, but they never took anywhere near it. So I want to make sure that we understand the progression of this as we've gone through it and the things that I've looked at as far as them being in the land. First of all, there's a promise that some people put together as though it's all one thing, as though what we read in chapter 12, verses 1 to 3 is the exact same promise that's spelled out here in chapter 15 and that interval that's found in chapter 13 where he says, you're going to have descendants who will occupy a land. He doesn't give the details until chapter 15, and that's where he's given more details. So what God is doing is building upon all of these things that are being said, but we should really, and people can challenge me on this if they like to, I think that we should look at chapter 12, verses 1 to 3 as one promise and put an exclamation point and end it there, because that's to the nations. It's plural. Now we're getting to the point where we're starting to talk about land, which is not part of chapter 12. Land comes later, and it comes through a direct line of one of his own sons, and we're going to start to develop those sons in chapters 16 and 17, because that really settles the whole matter of what are the two promises. The promise to the nations, then there is the singular promise of the nation through Isaac, and it involves land. Those are two separate things. Chapter 12 never hints at a land allotment to the nations, only to a singular nation and only through one son, not even the firstborn. All of that's hugely important, as we start to discuss the things that are mentioned in the New Testament and the arguments that are made against Israel being the nation of promise that God had given all the way back here in Genesis. So we want to be able to, in a systematic way, work through this bit by bit, piece by piece, portion by portion, to make sure that we see the fullness of what God has promised here and don't try to make it fit something where it doesn't ultimately fit. So we'll pick up on this coming Thursday. We're going to start to look at chapter 16, because what they failed to do here, Abram and Sarah, they failed to find out from God, let me make sure that we understand this properly. From you, Abram, also from Sarah? Or is it some other way? Because chapter 16 is where it gets to be a complete failure on Abram and Sarai's, I said Sarah earlier, Sarai. It becomes a complete failure on their part to not make sure that they understood exactly and precisely what God meant. They took matters into their own hands, and the ramifications of that are still with us to this day, 4,000 years later, and we'll look at that on Thursday in our study through the book of Matthew. So we'll gather together for that on Thursday. Hope that you are able to join us, and very much look forward to sharing through this entire discussion all the way up into the modern debate that there is in the church about, are the promises that were made to Abram and his descendants actually completely fulfilled in the church through Jesus Christ? I want to answer that question in its entirety as we work through this section. So any questions on any of that? Want to talk to me about the Israel trip, anything that I've mentioned in today's Bible study, or on the whole topic of Israel in the land today, then contact me through the ministry's website, and that is at oldpaththeology.net. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. I hope you're able to make it with us here, reading through the studies and studying through God's Word, both in the Old and New Testament here. We do it all throughout the week, and ultimately, given enough time, we work our way through the entirety of the Bible. So